Hello and welcome to this episode of The Rest is Entertainment Questions and Answers edition. I'm Marina Hyde.
And I am Richard Osman. We're still apart from each other.
I cannot infect you.
Your COVID has not passed. It has not cleared.
It hasn't cleared. I must keep you safe at all costs. But by the way, we've got someone wrote something so nice. Would you remember we were talking about AI commentary on local sports? You mentioned that.
Oh, yes, I was saying that the thing I would like, if AI can do anything, I would like it whenever you're walking through like a local park and there's a cricket match going on or a football match going on. I'd love it if somehow AI could commentate on it for me. I would sit and watch the whole game. That was my AI dream.
Well, this is like hearing that flying cars are reality, because listen to this. Chris Wright has written in and he says, I thought your listeners might like to hear this story. I'm an expat in Singapore and my 10-year-old son plays cricket in a local competition here. The competition is dominated by Indian kids and the games are live streamed on YouTube, which is great as it allows my family to tune in live from Australia when he's batting and bowling. A few weeks ago, I got a message from my brother asking who is providing the colourful commentary for the game, and I had to wander around the field looking for the commentator, who I couldn't find. After making inquiries, it turns out that $50 of the match fee goes to a guy living in the middle of nowhere in India who commentates on 4 hours worth of local 10-year-olds playing cricket based on the live stream, a team sheet, and presumably some messages from the scorers. It is a great service and well worth the money. That's so cool.
That's so cute, isn't it? Can you imagine that? If you're a kid and you had all of that.
I've watched an unbelievable amount of small boys cricket games. And actually Kieran used to do the scoring on a sort of WhatsApp for all the different parents. So like sometimes they can't, if people are working and couldn't make it there, then there would be like this sort of group and he would do some sort of commentary on that. But this is of a different level. And I'm absolutely gripped by it. I now want to watch this specific version of it. So, Chris, please get in touch and give me a link to that feed, and I will watch it. But I absolutely love the idea of this. It's literally, Richard. It's nearly flying cars. Your dream is nearly a reality.
It's nearly a reality. I've a tiny bit of any other business. A friend of mine was listening when you were talking about showing The Shining to your 9-year-old child, and lots of people have told us about the inappropriate things they've watched with their children. And a friend of mine, he should remain nameless, he said when our youngest child was 5, he and his wife often watched Grey's Anatomy. Yeah. He said his wife watched it more than me, but that Grey's Anatomy is one of those things we were watching. And sometimes if I was out, she would watch an episode without me. And I was fine with that. He says, so I come back in one day and his wife is sitting on the sofa with the 5-year-old and watching this thing, and my friend looks at these two characters on screen and says, I thought those two had split up. And his wife said, well, it seems not. And then his 5-year-old daughter said, they're not really back together, Daddy. It's just breakup sex. Said, and at that point, the 5-year-old was no longer allowed to watch Grey's Anatomy.
How precocious, in the most charming way.
In the most charming way. I have a question for you, Marina, from Thomasin, who has a question about Zack Snyder, the, let's say, controversialist director of things like Man of Steel, Justice League, a lot of the DC movies. Anyway, Thomasin's question is this. Do you think Zack Snyder is aware his fans are as toxic as they are and purposefully doesn't care? Also, what effect will the success of James Gunn's Superman have, if any, on them? I ask because I find it ludicrous that no matter what happens, they've decided on their version of reality that continues to change as facts change.
Yeah, I mean, this is the sort of emblematic, there's so many toxic fandoms, but the Zack Snyder, who's a big DC director, when he made Justice League for DC, for 4 years, there was a fan campaign, release the Snyder Cut. Zack Snyder is a particular sort of guy. And by the way, during the making of that film, something awful happened and his daughter took her own life. And it was and he does credit the fan movement with sort of bringing him back to filmmaking. So it's a more nuanced story than it could be. But I think in general, yes, I think he's definitely aware of how toxic it became. And I think he probably got a lot of toxic stuff as well. But he's a particular type of person. He has an unproduced screenplay for The Fountainhead, which I always feel is a character note in a director.
The Ayn Rand book, beloved of tech bros everywhere.
Yeah, beloved of tech bros everywhere and terrible people. He's very, very obsessed with director's cuts. He always does one. Sometimes he does 2 director's cuts. Wow. I feel like So, the critics of whoever, ever, any studio ever, are always just like, well, the director's cut is better. I would personally much rather sit through 9.5 hours of Heaven's Gate or whatever it is. Zack Snyder does actually claim, I think, never to have seen the Warner Brothers theatrical release cut of Justice League.
Same.
Ditto. No, I have actually seen it, but I didn't see it in theatres. But I think it's really interesting, as always with these things, if they're not doing it to you, then there is a sort of secret delight that they're kind of doing it in your service.
And will you explain who the fans are and the forums they use?
They're a very toxic online group of people who would just say, I want release his cut, and we're kind of obsessed with it. And like all of these things, that I think they're sort of mirrored in those Star Wars fandoms who kind of went absolutely nuts about The Last Jedi and said, I don't know, that the character of Rey was a sort of terrible, perfect little feminist, and they completely hounded Kelly Marie Tran off social media completely. And she was subject to sort of terrible racist and kind of sexist bullying. I don't know. A lot of critics nowadays feel that they're under constant siege from fandoms, and that fandoms take critical reviews as kind of personal attacks on them. And what I think all of this shows is it's become so interesting. Fandom has become such an identity. Fandom has become, and to some extent, and those old, I have friends who way before it was cool, who would say to me, this is literally the most uncool thing you could do, would go to things like Star Trek conventions, would go to, that was all uncool. And then suddenly it's like, oh no, Comic-Con's very cool. All of these things have become cool, and they've become much more mainstream to some extent. But rather than being for kind of shy, nerdy, outsidery kids who were quite nice, they have become places of huge aggression. And that's one of the big stories of in fandom of the past decade or two, is the idea of fandom as a kind of identity. It's part of identity politics, and like all the rest of identity politics become very vicious.
Well, it's like a football team. It's like having a team. Suddenly, Star Trek fans can be Millwall fans.
I totally agree with you, but I was thinking about this just when you were saying that. I was thinking, but it's sort of like factions within the fans of one football team. And you can say, okay, yes, there are the people who think of themselves as the kind of OG fans, and then there are the prawn sandwich brigade, and there's some kind of friction between them. But it's not really like this kind of internecine warfare, which is really odd, because it's like these are battles between people who essentially supposedly love the same fiction. They love Star Wars or they love whatever. And it becomes this real sort of, it's definitely a story that is something of the last decade or two, not even two. Whose voice matters most?
Who's purist?
Who's liked it longest? Who's liked it in the right way? Rather than feeling like it's a lovely kind of camaraderie, a brotherhood and a sisterhood that you all get swept up in because you basically like the same characters, it's become, like everything, a battleground. And I would say that the Snyder fandom was a particular example of that, and a kind of like, and to anyone else, like any of these other purity spirals or anything like that, within about a month or two of it running, to anyone else on the outside, it looks just completely deranged that people have gone this nuts about like a director's cut of a movie. And it's become bigger and bigger. And as you always say, those voices are just the loudest. Most people who like Star Wars are not like this, and most people who like DC are not like this. But the loudest voices really have taken over, and it has become fandom in so many ways, and in so many different strains of fandom have bizarrely become a form of identity politics.
Well, you have to be obsessional. You have to want to. There are certain types of people who will spend 8 hours a day on bulletin boards, and almost everyone in the world will not do that. And there is something about your personality that if you are able to spend 8 hours a day on a bulletin board, it says something about you. I loved this expression, a purity spiral.
Yeah. Oh, there's some really interesting things about how purity spirals form, and there's actually an incredible sort of deep dive article about one in a which I'll try and put into the show notes, about a knitting circle. And how, I mean, it's quite extraordinary, but it becomes so completely awful, and it becomes caught up with all different types of identity politics. And it's honestly just some people who got together and formed an online community because they like knitting, and it becomes beyond toxic. It's really such an interesting, long, deep dive article. I thoroughly recommend, and I'll put that in the show notes. Do you have any? Have you ever been aware of like a sort of provisional wing of extremist Thursday Murder Club fans?
Not especially. It was interesting with the film that there were certain things that changed from the book that people got very exercised about. But as far as I can see, in quite a fun way, that it seems to have been, we'd have loved this, we'd have loved that. I hope in the next movie they do this, they do that. And so, yeah, that feels like quite a healthy, enjoyable version of this. But to speak to the actual question, to Thomas's question, do you think Zack Snyder is comfortable with that? Do you think actually it sort of it feeds into his brand and to the movies that he makes?
Well, as I said, it's always nice when they're not doing it to you.
Yeah.
And I've never seen him come out and say, this is absolutely disgusting, don't do this in my name. But as I also said, it's something so awful happened to him in his personal life. It's probably not the number one priority, is dealing with this particular aspect of something that he mostly can't control. But I think it's very difficult for people. Anything you say to some extent just makes these things worse. But as always, when something quite fortunate is happening in your favor, you have to really step back and think, yeah, but what's the right thing to do here? Because otherwise, as I say, it can be just, I won't get in the way of this thing that is singing my praises to high heaven. I've got a question for you, Richard, about bake-off outfits from Sarah O'Day. I hope I've said your surname right, Sarah. She's watching the new series of Bake Off and once again find myself screaming at the television, why are the contestants always made to wear the same outfit 2 days in a row? We, the audience, know it's filmed over the 2 days, so they could have two outfits. Aren't they sweaty and covered in flour from the first day?
Thank you, Sarah, for that question. This is I could probably answer this myself, but the lovely wardrobe mistress on House of Games and lots of other shows I do, and she works with on lots of big entertainment shows. Sharon Smith works on Bake Off, and she does all the costumes and wardrobe mainly for the talent. So and she is, I love Sharon to bits, but she loves having her voice out there. She does it every time. We used to do, like, on Pointless, if ever we did like an EastEnders special, we would do like a little pre-titles tease on the square, and it would always be Sharon walking out of a house going, "Oi, Xander, I'm having your baby." So I knew that Sharon would be delighted to send us a voice note and tell us the exact answer to Sarah's question. I will say this: I think in the history of this podcast, every single time someone has given us a voice note or filmed something for us, they always start by saying, "Hello, Marina and Richard." I'll say this: you can tell the sort of relationship we have that is not how Sharon starts this, but she does have an answer to your question, Sarah.
Hello, Marina. In answer to the question regarding bakers wearing the same outfit for 2 days, no, we don't try and pretend that it's all filmed over 1 day. There's clear parts where we sort of say, well done, bakers, get some rest tonight and we'll see you in the morning. But they're kept in the same outfits pretty much because there's lots of interviews that are filmed across the 2 day period. And those interviews might be social media, or they might be interviews that go into the show. So it looks far smoother to have a 1 hour show where everybody's in the same outfit rather than jumping in and out of different tops and distracting the viewer. It's easy to keep them all in the same thing. And they also do get messy for continuity. If they make a mess on 1 day, that mess is still there the next day on their tops, unless it's something really drastic. Like, our wardrobe department pretty much look after the judges and the presenters. They don't really get too involved in the bakers unless something drastic happens, like, say, for example, a mixer exploded and they got completely covered in cake mix. Then we would obviously go into the rescue, or their button fell off, or their zip broke, or something like that. But other than that, they're just kind of left to it. They're just asked to bring nice bright colours to wear underneath their aprons, and off they go. I hope that helps.
That does help.
Thank you so much, Sharon. She'll be so happy to have her voice on the podcast. But it is that thing, Sarah. You please don't scream at the TV. But if you are making a show like that you are making so many other things these days. You're not just filming those 2 days. You are filming so many clips, social media clips, all sorts of things. Also, there might be something if you do an interview with someone on the first day and they say something which actually would work perfectly on the second day, and suddenly you can't use it because they're wearing something different. So as a producer, it doesn't make any difference to anyone that people are wearing different clothes, but as a producer, it just makes your life so much easier in an edit. It also has that thing of, especially early on in a series, if you are getting to know a whole series of different people and you're not quite sure who's who, if they are wearing something distinctive, you notice them and remember them more easily. Whereas if they're suddenly wearing something else the next day, there's a bit of our brain in the very early parts when we're not sure who people are, where we get confused between people as well. So it just makes everybody's life so much easier. So if you're watching it, again, this is always the question, if it is something that makes you scream at the television and it doesn't make any sense, there will always be a reason. There'll be a production reason why it's easier. And by all means, by the way, if anything else like that crops up, do ask us. And we'll always be able to ask somebody, if not always Sharon.
But I love that.
I have a question here from Mark and James O'Moran and about the Traitors Island. And they said, my son and I are loving the first series of the Irish version of the Traitors. It's really good if you haven't seen it. We've noticed that the round table looks the same as the one used in the UK version of the show. Is it the same table? If so, how is it transported? It is not the same table. There we go. That was a nice, easy one. They made their own absolute copy because, again, on a TV crew, you are surrounded by these brilliant people who can make anything. And it's absolutely cheaper to get one of those brilliant people to make an exact copy of something than to dismantle it in the castle up in Scotland, send it over to Ireland, dismantle it and send it back. So yeah, it is not the same table, but it's a testament to the art of set designers that it looks exactly the same. That's a nice, easy one.
Right, everybody, shall we now proceed to a break?
This episode is brought to you by Sky, where you can watch unmissable shows, including the final farewell of the award-winning Sky original comedy, Brassic.
7 series later, the gang from Hawley are bowing out, still chasing schemes with full conviction. Brassic charges through its biggest challenge yet, like a group that never learned the meaning of last orders.
It's chaos with a curtain call. Joe Gilgan, Michelle Keegan, Dominic West, big names you might expect on 3 entirely different billboards, yet all improbably colliding in a northern town with more calamities than bus routes.
This time, it's old enemies resurfacing, long-lost family reappearing, and trouble following them at every turn. But rather than an ending, it feels like a send-off true to form, messy, riotous, and impossible mistake for anyone else.
They're leaving the stage the way icons should, with a proper bang, a finale stitched together with mischief, misfits, and just enough mayhem to feel like Hawley to the end.
Watch the final farewell of Brassic now on Sky with new episodes weekly. Requires relevant Sky TV subscription. Welcome back, everybody. Marina, a question for you from Darren York. He asks, are films able to achieve box office success through a rage-baiting, so bad it's good campaign? Is that commercially viable?
Oh, good question, Darren. In our imagination, we think that this has happened quite a lot. But actually, normally that happens after release. Things become cult classics and so on, and the audience finds them and embraces them. And they become something that people kind of go back to, and they become sort of, as I say, cult classics. Funnily enough, if you listen to our bonus episode on Rocky Horror, which isn't bad, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but there was a significant flaw in it, if you've listened to that episode, which lent itself to audience participation, which meant that it became that sort of a cult classic. So every now and then you get some that are absolutely deliberate and that they lean into it. Fewer than you'd think. Lots of old B movies became, like sort of Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. But Sharknado, which was made by Sci-Fi, that was marketed as even though that was, relatively recent, it was marketed in the way of those old B movies. And the tagline for that was "Enough said." So that I would say is an instance where they definitely lent into doing it. Now, one of the really interesting ones that people think was marketed as so bad, it was Snakes on a Plane. When that came out, that was New Line Cinema, and when it was announced, and people were like, "Sorry, Samuel L. Jackson's going to be in a movie called Snakes on a Plane." You might remember it sort of blew up, and it became a sort of, a meme and everything beforehand, and fans were suggesting scenes and dialogue. The whole title was obviously very memeable. Now, so New Line took the view that they were going to lean into that whole thing, and they did include some of those suggested fan scenes, and they did include, and yet it lost money. So that thing that you said at the end of the question, Richard, where you're saying, is it commercially? Do you ever really want to say that something's so bad? you can code the language and kind of euphemize it. You might want to say, don't miss the madness, or see it while you still can. And there are films that sort of do that, or...
Everybody's talking about it.
Yeah, everybody's talking about it, exactly. But you're not... honestly saying that this thing isn't very good is just like, never do that. It's really bad vibes. So you might call it the ultimate midnight screening movie, or you might do anything you can to get audience participation. A lot of them start out like, certain ones, like, Cocaine Bear, that was, everyone, you can't make a movie called Kerry Russell did that, but you can't make a movie called Cocaine Bear without everyone thinking this is obviously supposed to be bad. And I'm not, Zombie Strippers, I'm supposed to go, I need to go and see this because they're just making a joke about it. Yeah, there was a movie that actually did surprisingly well, like a little tiny movie. It did surprisingly well for a horror comedy. There was something called The Velocipasta, which I love. And it's actually just a funny story. What I quite like about it is this guy called Brendan Steer directed it. And when he was at film school, he was like either NYU or the Tisch, he was at one of those New York skip film schools. And his phone auto-corrected Velociraptor to Velocipasta. And he was like, well,
what's that film? What would that film
sorry.
be?
Okay,
yeah.
Fine, I'll make that. A priest travels to China. He gets bitten by a radioactive artifact. I've seen bits of this, but I haven't seen the whole thing.
Oh, pasta like a
yeah,
vicar,
like a priest,
not pasta
right?
like carbs.
And
okay.
not that one. Harder to personify. Anyway, and he turns into a dinosaur when he gets angry. So certain things like that, but that's a tiny little sort of, independent sort of student thing, really. Most of them start out serious, even these things that are like unbelievably bad, like Tommy Wiseau's The Room, that starts out serious. They become more popular because they can't become part of memes. I personally don't think, as I said, Sharknado is really the only one I can think of them saying, enough said. But even that isn't saying... What you're kind of saying is like, there's a tornado of sharks, right? Come on, why would you not want to see this? So you can code it, but you cannot say, I don't think. It's just what you are nonetheless getting people to leave the house and pay money to see something.
You're either deliberately setting out at the beginning to do something that catches a sort of kitsch aesthetic, but if you're doing something that isn't trying to do that, it's very hard to turn that into money. It's difficult to turn ironic watching into money.
I couldn't agree more. Try and make me a cult classic. Someone you say, go on, come up with a cult classic, and you can have all the ingredients. It's like someone saying to you, oh my God, I've read loads of self-help books. I could do one of them. You couldn't, okay, because your heart's not in it. And you think, oh, I could do something so cynical. It's very, very difficult in any kind of artistic project at all, or even a literary project, or even a self-help book, to think, I'm that cynical, I can see all the elements of how they do this, and I can produce something like that. Something gets in the way, and you won't make something brilliant by accident, but you also won't make a cult classic. You'll just make nothing. Your heart sort of has to be in it, which is why the things that do become cult classics, they were really definitely trying very hard.
And there's also that thing of, you say, oh, but me and all of my friends, we watch it. We just watch it and laugh at it, but so everyone I know, so this must be making money. That mainstream culture does not do that. There is a part of our culture, and we're absolutely part of it, that will do that and will enjoy that. But in terms of actually making big box office, you have to find the heart of culture, and the heart of culture does not, ironically, watch things.
No, you can't. You have to mean it. Obviously, within within a fiction, you have to mean it.
Yeah.
Oh, God, talking of cynicism, I'm so devastated to have to ask this question, Richard. But I've got to ask you a question because Simon's written in to say, with the first anniversary of the release of Unleashed by Boris Johnson approaching, could you guys give us an update of how sales have gone and how that works commercially?
Yes, I will. So, yeah, we worked out that his advance had been £2 million. So he was given £2 million to write this book. So, and we gave a few updates on how it was selling, but now it has settled, so we know exactly what it's, it's not still selling. So I've looked into all the numbers this week and spoken to various people at various publishers about exactly what we think about who's made what money.
I wish you hadn't had to do this, but carry on.
Well, it's not all good news. It didn't do terribly. Did not do. Certainly, most political memoirs absolutely disappear, and hasn't done that, but it's a question of whether they paid Boris Johnson too much. You'll be shocked to learn that they did. So Boris Johnson, we know how much he's made, which is £2 million. That's his advance. And then it's a question of, on top of that, you hope to make royalties. So I can tell you now for a fact he has not made royalties. So he has not earned out that £2 million advance. So since it came out, it sold in hardback 150,000 copies, which is not terrible. It's not great.
You saw that in a week. Sorry.
Yeah, it's not amazing. And it's certainly not £2 million advance level. I mean, it's not even close to that. It's absurdly far away from a £2 million advance level. So he sold 150,000 copies. Now, one of the key things in this world is your average sale price. So when you look at the Nielsen ratings, they'll show you how many you sold, plus they will show you your average sale prices. Almost all books are discounted. Amazon will discount them quite heavily. So you'll see the average sale price. Now, the average sale price for Boris's book, I think the recommended retail price is 30. The average sale price is 17. And sometimes, again, if you see that written about in the press, they go, oh, it's half price. And it's not. It's put at £30 so that, you can discount it and still be making money. And £17 is actually a pretty good per unit sale price. You look at some of the Freedom McFadden books that are huge at the moment, it'll have an average sale price of £4.30 or something like that. But even for a hardback, 17 is not bad. So you multiply 17 by 150, you get somewhere around 2.5 million. So the book in total has grossed 2.5 million in hardback. You want to add in your audio and things like that as well. Let's say 3.5 million it's made. The publisher, who in this case is HarperCollins, if a book makes 3.5 million, the rough rule of thumb is once you've taken out retailers and what have you, the publisher will see back about half of that. So they'll see back about 1.75 million. Now, you've got to take all your costs out of that as well. It's not like a movie, but there are substantial costs. So maybe that takes them down to 1.3, 1.4 million, something like that. So they have paid Boris Johnson 2 million. I'm going to say, and this is, again, not just my numbers, but various people I talk to, maybe they've made back 1.3, 1.4 million. So they're losing 600,000. They still have the paperback to come. They have overseas sales. Neither of those are going to be enormous.
Is he big in Japan?
For this, but not so much. Not so much. He's not like the Velosa. He's not like the Velosa pasta. HarperCollins say they've made money on this, but I've speaking to every single person I can from every single side of the business. No one could work out how they have made money. As we talked, there weren't serialization rights because Boris Johnson's got its column with the Daily Mail. So over the the lifetime of this book, it may well be that HarperCollins would be able to say we'll probably clear that to 2 million. But this is not a book that is kind of, they were hoping to sell 500,000, for example.
You say it's not like a movie, but he did do a Christmas advertising campaign for this book, which I only remember because he was writing his naughty list in this advert, and on one of the pages, right at the top, he wrote Richard Osman. Without any question, purely because of this. He always does that. He lets you know that he's like, why are you showing weakness, Johnson? You should have just pretended you'd never heard us talking about you. But regrettably, he must have heard you analysing his book sales, and he allowed himself to reveal himself as being very upset by it.
Listen, he's right. As I say, he's made that 2 million, which he doesn't have to pay back. Doesn't have to pay back a penny of that. But certainly, if he'd sold 500,000, he would have made another. What would he have made on top of that? He would have made at least another 1.5 million plus every single sale of every single paperback for the rest of history. He'd be making money on. At the moment, anytime anyone buys his book, he is not making any more money. So he's made a lot already, but he is not making another penny. HarperCollins say they've made money. I don't possibly see where they are. I've heard this theory a number of times, but I cannot back it up. But I say it anyway because I've heard it from a lot of people, which is political memoirs tend to get massively overpaid for. And I've always slightly wondered why, because you think, at the end of, when someone's memoir is out, they can no longer sort of do you any favours. And HarperCollins almost always do the big political memoirs, certainly for people from the right. And the thing I've heard a number of times now is that a publishing company might make a deal with a sitting politician while they're still in power for their memoirs after they're out of power. And a politician knows that of the things they can cash in on when they leave power, one of the big ones is a memoir. That's one of the big sort of chunks of change that you can get. You know, Boris knows there's 2 million. And if you are pre-agreeing a deal with somebody while they're still in power, then actually there is some sort of payback for you. You know, you do actually get advantage of that person owing you a favour because they're still in power. I'm not saying that's what happened here, by the way. I'm not saying that HarperCollins has ever done it. I'm not giving any specifics. But certainly if you were to say, oh, by the way, at the point where you do leave power, shall we pre-agree that you'll get £1 million for your memoirs or whatever it is? And that sort of makes some sense, because then you don't really have to make money out of it, because you've already got your money's worth in a different way. But this book has not sold terribly. £150,000 would be 150,000 hardbacks is a good sale if you had a £500,000 advance. You know, then everyone's laughing. Boris Johnson's making royalties, HarperCollins are making money. But if you pay somebody £2 million and you sell 150,000 hardbacks, then everybody is losing out, apart from the person who was given £2 million in the first place.
I think that about wraps us up for today.
Yeah, doesn't it just? Pleasure as always.
A great pleasure. We will return tomorrow with a really interesting bonus episode, I think, because it's about script doctoring, which is a sort of deliberately unsung part of the movie business, but there's lots of interesting stuff about that.
People who are sort of flown in for a week just to punch things up and get paid a huge amount of money for a very small amount of time, and usually have their names kept off the final script as well. Yeah,
it's fascinating, and it always has been for like how many decades of Hollywood history. So that's for our members. If you want to join and have ad-free listening and so on, it's therestisentertainment.com. Otherwise, we will see you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.